don't have a lot of memories. And I think it's just a way of sort of my brain protecting me from a lot of things, childhood trauma. My very first memory, unfortunately, is of me hiding under a bed because my mom had left to go work in the United States and had left me since almost birth. My sisters and I. And so I remember her coming, it was like late at night, and to pick us up because she had paid a coyote to cross us. And so it was time. And so she came and picked us up from the only really home that I knew for my first 4 or 5 years of my life. So that's unfortunately my first memory as a child of being, I'm hiding under the bed, and she's like, come on, we have to go. And so that's the first memory I have of Mexico. A migrant, a lot of migrant population, working a lot of crops. The San Joaquin Valley is very known for being such a huge farming community. So my mom, and then at the time my stepdad, they were, picking cotton, picking fruit, pretty much following the crops wherever they were. We ended up staying in a very small town in California, Chowchilla, which most people know because of the bus that was buried. I don't know if you remember that back in, I think, the early 80s, maybe late 70s. Yeah, so we stayed there, and we would live in housing that was given to us by the farmers, the ranchers. And they'd have houses where their migrant workers would stay. It was a 1-bedroom, one bath home. At least it was a house, so we had a little bit of a yard and some neighbors, and so we got a sense of community there. And most of them were all Latinos, Mexicanos too. So at least it felt like familiar a little bit, but it was very. I also didn't understand that I was poor. But I remember when we had to sleep on the floor, I had a cockroach crawl in my ear. So now I also have this trauma of sleeping on the floor. Yeah, of sleeping on the floor, because I always think something's going to crawl in my ear. But really, my trauma isn't the cockroach. It's also the poverty, the being poor, and having to sleep on the floor in that way. But it was a rough childhood. My first job, and I think I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. I started working with my mom. My mom was had worked her way up the ladder in the in the fields in fruit picking. I picked figs. I think I only made like maybe $2 an hour. I wasn't as fast as some of the adults, so I didn't make very much money. But at the time, I thought $100 for 2 weeks was huge. I thought it was big. And what really prompted me to want to work, though, was I had never played sports. I had never joined any kind of school activity. And I remember that year I said, I want to become a cheerleader. But my parents didn't have the money to buy the uniforms and all of that involved with becoming a cheerleader in high school. And so my way to earn it was I had to go work in the fields to be able to pay for myself to become a cheerleader, which I ended up hating, actually. Because it was another one of those scenarios where I just really don't belong here. Like, this is not, most of the cheerleaders where I went to high school were white American girls. And so it just felt, I was short, I was chubby, I had, I was super developed at a very young age. Like, I couldn't jump, I couldn't, so it's kind of like, what did I do this for? Yeah, it was then that I understood, the value of working to achieve what I wanted. And I think that was the lesson there. was, that I worked and then I reaped the fruits of my work, of my labor. And it wasn't the figs. It was that cheerleading uniform. Yeah, it's funny because I for a long time I hated figs because it reminded me of that time in my life. And it was about 5 or 6 years ago. I went to Fresh Market, kind of a nice grocery store. And I don't realize these things until it kind of comes full circle, but I saw a package of figs from the same farm in the same town where I picked figs. And it still gets me. I stared at them and I was like, I don't want figs, but I ended up buying them, and they sat in my refrigerator, and I would go in my kitchen, and I'd open the refrigerator and I'd look at the figs and I'd close the refrigerator and I'd walk away. And finally one day I pulled the figs out and I had one, and then I threw the rest of them away. After I became an adult and away, I kind of wanted to forget that part of my life, not realizing how valuable it was. I just kind of wanted to put it behind me. And I think that with the figs, it's kind of when it started, like, to be okay. To be okay that I grew up poor, to be okay that I grew up as an immigrant, to be okay that I was made fun of for being different, like I started to finally become okay with it.